Friends, Romans, countrymen, this is a silly little time, and welcome to something new. So, I'll be reading to you tonight. It's story time with a silly little time. I'll be reading the first chapter of the book that I've written, and see if you like it. See if you're interested in it. I think you'll find it interesting. This is, you know what? I'll just get into it. Enough beating around the bush. I'm proud to present tonight a novel. On the front cover, the title is Golden Threads, the Book of Davatsya, Lady of Carmine and Gold. Written and read to you by Evan McCarty. Second page, Golden Threads, the Book of Davatsya, Lady of Carmine and Gold, a folk horror novel. We have a little foreword, and it is as such. It kills only animals. You dare suggest I am an animal? Let us say I suggest you may be human. Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mahiam to Paul Atreides. Dune, Frank Herbert, 1965. All right. The first chapter. Chapter 1, a very good place to start. Chapter 1, The Birth. Screams pierced the evening silence. Fires crackled and popped. The smell of cooking food trailed on the breeze. In her bed, the woman cried out, the pitch and volume rising to an agonized shriek as she pushed. Matrons in their colorless homespun gowns dabbed her brow and cooed reassurance. The midwife rushed out of the hut, carrying bloodied cloths. Far too much blood had left the woman's body, and only part of it had been soaked up by the rags. The midwife sprinted, ignoring the stares from men around the fires. Their eyes were sullen as they knelt, toasting bread on sticks, smoking pipes, watching the woman as she bustled along. The midwife drew cold water, spilling it from the bucket in her haste. She shivered as a chill breeze grabbed at her dress. November was a hard month for both mother and babe. The wind sucked heat out of the body, and firewood dwindled at an amazing pace. Food, carefully preserved in the autumn, never lasted as long as one expected. The water gathered. She returned to the hut. The wailing, the matrons, the coppery tang of blood, and the sour smell of unwashed bodies hit her. It was as she had left it. Still no child. The midwife strode up to the birthing bed, pursing her lips as she saw even more blood gouting out onto the linen sheets. She exhaled sharply, her nostrils flaring. The mother had been in labor for a full day and a half. The midwife glared under her brows at the old women, who clucked like spooked hens. One of them murmured a prayer to the Great Mother and Great Father. The midwife snorted softly. The father would be of no help. Neither would the father of the child. The father? What father? He was long gone. No one knew who he was. The woman had had a husband years ago, but he was dead. He couldn't give her any children. This was no ghost story told around the fireplace at inns or late at night at village gatherings. The woman writhing on the bed refused to mention the man that had gotten her pregnant. When asked, she went pale and would not speak until the topic was changed. He had left an impression, whoever he was. That was certain. The midwife clicked her tongue sourly as she wrung wet cloths. The men didn't attend births in this village at any rate. They worked, ate, drank, sat around fires muttering to each other in their low voices. They'd grunt in approval at a son, scowl at a daughter. They'd crawl in bed unwashed after the hard work of bringing a child into the world was done, and dream of their next meal and the days until they could lie on top of their wives again. This was not men's work. No one but she had the skills to handle birthing children, much less a breech birth. The midwife had dutifully palpated the woman's swollen belly and, once dilated, had felt inside. She had felt feet. She searched more, eliciting a sharp indrawn breath from the mother. Little feet. Little toes, a breech birth without a doubt. Her heart had dropped into her own toes at that. The midwife snapped out of reverie as the woman wailed shrilly, her face a red mess of tears and sweat. Her thin, dark hair was plastered to her scalp. The mother sat up, her arms planted behind her, white-knuckled hands balled up in the blankets. Matrons dabbed her brow again, and even in the dim light of the hut, the midwife could see the cloth smearing blood above the woman's eyebrow. Every single rag would be bloody by the time this child was born. The midwife sighed, shaking her hands dry, and offered the agonized woman cool water in a rough-hewn wooden cup. With a wail and a swipe of her arm, the mother dashed the cup and its contents out of the midwife's hands. It bounced once on the earthen floor and lay forgotten. Many more hours passed. The dying light of evening passed into the blackness of night. The woman's screams grew feebler, turning to moans. The brows of the old women furrowed more and more. Their cooing was replaced by hushed whispers. "She'll die, great mother, preserve her," they muttered. This brought a sharp rebuke from the midwife. Chastened, the old women averted their eyes, mumbling indistinctly. The midwife kneeled at the foot of the bed, hands bracing the woman's inner thighs. Contractions rolled through the woman's body, but the child was decidedly stuck. She rose dejectedly and staggered back involuntarily, legs tingling beneath her. The midwife had been squatting before the bloody, flexing vagina for an hour without realizing it. The stolid woman righted herself, brushing her skirt absently. This nonsense had to end. The child needed to be born, for its sake and the mother's. The midwife turned and snapped at the old women. "Get me a small, sharp knife and milk of the puppy." The old women ceased their muttering and stared at her in stunned silence. On the bed, the birthing woman's breathing was shallow and rapid. The midwife scowled. "Did you hear me? A small, sharp knife, milk of the puppy. You will find both in my basket." There was a brief, hushed argument about who should retrieve the items. The midwife sighed. "Today, please." Shawls rustled like feathers, but the matter was decided, and a matron returned with the offerings in her arthritic talons. The midwife did not thank her. It had taken long enough. She grabbed both, pouring a few drops of milky liquid onto her tongue. The midwife's eyes closed, and she breathed a heavy sigh. She flexed her fingers, dispelling the cramps. She inhaled, exhaled, and silently recited a short prayer to the Great Mother. It was curious how easily it came back to her, even after a decade out of the sisterhood. "Great Mother, guide my hand. Fill me with your clarity of purpose." Old habits didn't die hard. They didn't die at all. They laid in wait like a predator in the brush, ready to pounce and sink black claws into flesh when you needed them to take down a specific type of prey. She crouched down next to the woman and spoke firmly. "Open your mouth, dear." The woman stared at her, eyes wide and bewildered. "Open your mouth," the midwife repeated. "It's for your pain." Reluctantly, the woman opened her mouth and the midwife poured in a measured stream of the opiate. The retrieved cup held to her lips, the woman sipped water and laid flat, eyes beginning to flutter. Before long, her eyes closed, and her head slumped to the side. Jaw squared, the midwife began cutting. Minutes later, the screaming started again. It rose from a choked, wordless cry, and the same question was repeated. It echoed throughout the village, stirring the sleepers nearby and disquieting the wakeful. "Where is her face?" The listeners froze. They looked about and felt the goose flesh rise on their arms. "Where is her face? Why does she not have a face?"